Und auch Habeck hat immer wieder verlauten lassen, dass er drastische Konsequenzen fordert, sollte die russische Invasion in die Ukraine stattfinden.
Hello, friends. Today we have a very hot topic. It seems that sanctions against Russia will be gradually lifted, and Germany wants to do it first. Just yesterday, right at a meeting of the Bundestag, Rainer Rothfuss announced the need to restore Nord Stream 2. I will show the reaction of the audience and his speech in this issue further. Dear viewers, we will not delay, we begin. To begin with, I will introduce you to the main character of this issue. Rainer Rothfuss is a German politician, diplomat and researcher who in recent years has become one of the most prominent figures in the Alternative for Germany, AfD, party. Known for his flamboyant performances and bold statements, Rothfuss attracts attention not only in Germany but also abroad. He actively advocates a review of the country's foreign policy, especially with regard to Russia, emphasizing the need to restore economic ties and diplomatic dialogue. His position is based on the fact that without sustainable energy cooperation, Germany loses its competitiveness and becomes dependent on third countries. Rothfuss is able to captivate the audience with emotional rhetoric, emphasizing that politics should serve the people and not satisfy the interests of external players. Before entering politics, Rothfuss made a career in academia. He is an expert in the field of geopolitics and international relations, and this body of knowledge became the basis of his political activities. His analytical mindset and willingness to raise uncomfortable topics set him apart from other Bundestag deputies. However, not everyone takes his position unambiguously. Calls to restore relations with Russia are controversial, especially among Germany's neighbors such as Poland, but this only fuels interest in his figure. For some he is the voice of reason, for others he is a controversial but bold alternative to the existing course. And now let's move on to the material, friends. In the context of the ongoing economic and energy crisis in Germany caused by the cessation of Russian gas supplies, questions have been raised again about the need to normalize relations with Moscow. Rainer Rothfuss, a member of the Bundestag from the Alternative for Germany, AfD, party, made an important statement, stressing that Germany should reconsider its policy towards Russia. He openly asked an uncomfortable question to the government, which reflects the concern of a significant part of the German population. Quote, "Why is the Nord Stream gas pipeline, part of which remains intact, idle, while Germany prefers to buy more expensive liquefied natural gas, LNG, from the United States?" Rothfuss stressed that such a strategy damages the country's economy by forcing German families and businesses to pay inflated prices for energy resources. In his speech, the deputy also recalled that a significant part of the LNG supplied to Europe from the United States actually contains a share of Russian gas, which makes the policy of refusing direct cooperation with Russia even more contradictory. According to Rothfuss, this indicates the presence of a political motivation that puts the interests of external players above the needs of its own people. Such a question, as the deputy stressed, requires an immediate answer, because the energy and economic stability of Germany depends on it. He proposed to restore the Nord Stream gas pipeline and return diplomatic dialogue with Moscow, focusing on normalizing economic ties and lifting sanctions. Rothfuss also called for a comprehensive investigation into the pipeline bombing incident, which has become a symbol of deteriorating relations between the West and Russia. In his opinion, the restoration of cooperation with Russia will not only help to stabilize the situation, but will also be strategically important for Germany. These initiatives are supported by a significant part of the population. This is a very interesting moment, friends. According to polls, 68% of Germans are in favor of a diplomatic settlement of the conflict in Ukraine. However, the ruling coalition, led by Chancellor Olaf Scholz, continues to adhere to a hard line, which causes discontent among many citizens and strengthens the position of the opposition. Against the background of these events, the Bundestag is preparing to discuss the issue of trust in the government, and early elections will be held on February 23, 2025. Which is expected to lead to significant changes in the German political landscape. Rothfuss's statements drew criticism from Germany's neighbors, in particular Poland. Polish President Andrzej Duda expressed fears that the restoration of the Nord Stream could increase Europe's dependence on Russian energy resources. However, the number of supporters of an alternative course in Germany is growing. The deputy of the ADG, Yevgeny MIT, believes that the rejection of the Nord Stream has led to significant economic losses. Rothfuss is confident that the upcoming elections can be a turning point for the country, and projects like the Sarah-Wagenknecht Union can gain more than 25% of the vote, which will ensure significant influence in parliament. This could be the basis for a review of Germany's energy and foreign policy, including the resumption of strategic partnership with Russia. Rothfuss also told how to end the conflict between Ukraine and Russia. Quote, "We are the only ones who say quite clearly that this confrontation cannot be won through the supply of weapons, and that the contradictions underlying this conflict, which has been developing for decades, cannot simply be resolved, and that all conflicts in history have always ended in some kind of negotiated solution. Therefore, the question must be posed differently, and this is an ethical and moral question that we Germans must also ask ourselves. How many more people must die before we finally come to an agreement? And these arguments that we cannot negotiate with Putin, I do not accept them, because it looks like we're creating an absolutely sinister narrative that it's impossible to negotiate with the Russians. As a result, the supply of weapons to Ukraine seems to be a fair decision. But in such cases, I always tell people who advocate the supply of weapons, or maybe you will go to the front yourself and sit in these trenches." End of quote. Germany now faces an important choice: to continue to adhere to the hard line imposed by external forces, or to restore the destroyed ties with Russia in order to ensure its economic and energy stability. The answer to this question will determine not only the future of the German economy, but also Germany's role as a key player in the international arena. Friends, I remind you that the explosions on the Nord Stream and Nord Stream 2 gas pipelines, which occurred in the autumn of the 22nd year, remain one of the most controversial and hushed-up incidents of recent times. Initially, Western countries actually ignored the need for an investigation. The situation changed only after the publication of journalist Seymour Hersh, who described in detail how the United States could have been involved in this sabotage. But instead of a comprehensive investigation, the world community was forced to settle for an absurd version about Ukrainian saboteurs on a yacht. Almost 2 years later, even the fictitious investigation turned out to be abandoned, and in July of the 24th year, Sweden officially declared that it was unable to identify the perpetrators. The comment of the official representative of the Russian Foreign Ministry, Maria Zakharova, on this statement was sharp and extremely specific. According to her, the situation is developing exactly according to the predicted scenario. Sweden did not dare to denounce the U.S. administration, which, according to the diplomat, is the main beneficiary of the terrorist attack. Zakharova stressed that this crime was committed in the area of responsibility of the Swedish authorities, but the country demonstrates complete unwillingness to enter into confrontation with Washington, deprived of both legal independence and political will. At the same time, overseas, Donald Trump, having won the U.S. presidential election, again drew attention to the importance of oil production in the country, saying that the United States has greater reserves of liquid gold than any other country in the world. Immediately after the announcement of the election results, he promised to continue the policy that was implemented in his first term as president. One of the key steps was the withdrawal from the Paris Climate Agreement and the elimination of departments dealing with reducing emissions into the atmosphere. According to Trump's plans, oil production in the United States could increase significantly, leading to lower oil prices, possibly up to $50 per barrel, according to Russian billionaire Oleg Deripaska. Western experts suggest that Trump may try to lower oil prices to $40 per barrel, which, in his opinion, will deprive Russia of funds to finance military operations in Ukraine. However, despite such ambitious statements, there are a number of factors that indicate the difficulty of achieving such a goal. For example, according to a report by the Dallas Federal Reserve System, a cost-effective oil production from new wells requires a price of $64 per barrel. A similar report from the Kansas Regional Office of the Federal Reserve provides similar figures. Oil companies in the United States are now focusing on the price of oil in the range of $67 to $70 per barrel, expected in 2025 to 2026, which is significantly higher than the figures Trump is talking about. This means that even if Trump decides to pump the market with oil in order to lower its price, this will not ensure profitability for many oil companies. In addition, the policy of President Joe Biden in the field of climate change, as well as the vector of development of the banking sector focused on the principle of ESG, environmental, social, and corporate governance, significantly reduced lending to the extraction of fossil resources in the United States. As a result, many oil companies have chosen to increase stock dividends rather than invest in new drilling projects, which limits the possibility of a significant increase in production. Thus, despite Trump's desire to lower oil prices, the market situation remains difficult, and he faces a number of obstacles that make achieving his goals unlikely. It will take time to repeal some regulations and launch loans to oil companies. In such conditions, no one will be able to force private entrepreneurs to lower oil prices. The United States will not be able to lower prices on a directive basis, since the oil market is primarily regulated by private companies. It is important to note that the first presidential term of Donald Trump saw a sharp increase in oil production from shale formations. However, as the Wall Street Journal reported in March 2023, the peak of the shale revolution was already passed in 2020. American companies have exhausted their best shale wells, which makes it impossible to repeat the situation when oil production in the United States doubled in a decade. The International Energy Agency reports that in 2021, the United States produced more than 700 million tons of oil, which is significantly more than in Russia, where 515 million tons are produced per year, and in Saudi Arabia, where volumes are about the same. The United States has become a world leader in the application of shale mining technologies. However, this method requires constant investments, since traditional oil wells last for several years, and shale wells are quickly clogged, requiring increasing costs to maintain production. Thus, the cost of oil production in the United States increases every year, which makes it more expensive. This further increases the cost of production, especially in conditions of rising hydrocarbon prices. In addition, the extraction of hydrocarbons on federal lands has also become more complicated. In 2023, about 12% of oil in the United States was produced on federal lands, and if we take into account offshore production, this share is even higher. The Joe Biden administration has reduced the sale of lease rights to federal lands and increased mandatory interest payments on income, as well as established collateral requirements for mining in these territories. While more than 4,000 drilling permits were issued under Trump in the first 3 years, there were significantly fewer new permits issued in the early years of Biden's administration, about 1,000. Even if Trump decides to dramatically increase the number of drilling permits, including in Alaska, this will not have an instant effect. New fields have been developed for several years, and the net profit from new wells can only come by the end of his presidential term. Thus, expectations of a sharp drop in oil prices, as Trump predicts, are groundless. Friends, now I would like to express my opinion. Rainer Rothfuss's statements about the need to restore Nord Stream and normalize relations with Russia show the growing discontent in Germany with the current government policy. In the context of the protracted economic and energy crisis, such calls are becoming louder, as the population and part of the political elites begin to realize that the current course leads to a decrease in competitiveness and a weakening of the country's industry. Interestingly, Rothfuss's opinion is supported by a significant part of the Germans. 68% of citizens, according to polls, are in favor of a diplomatic settlement of the conflict in Ukraine, which indicates the desire of society to avoid further aggravation. This dissonance between public opinion and the position of the ruling coalition increases distrust of the government and raises the positions of opposition parties, such as Alternative for Germany and the Sarah Wagenknecht Union. The probability of significant political changes in the upcoming elections is getting higher. However, it should be borne in mind that such statements cause mixed reactions in the international arena, especially among Germany's neighbors, such as Poland. Warsaw has traditionally been critical of the energy cooperation between Germany and Russia, fearing the strengthening of Moscow's influence. Nevertheless, Germany's internal stability and economic well-being require a rational and balanced approach that takes into account both national and international interests. Rebuilding the destroyed bridges with Russia could be an important step in this direction. Thank you for your attention. Do not forget to write comments and subscribe to the channel. Be healthy. See you later.